Okay, thank you all for taking the time to join us today for our pre-bootcamp session on navigating the DPI website. This is a new addition to our bootcamp series. After 2 years in my position at DPI, I've learned so much about navigating the DPI website, but I do remember being frustrated when I was working in the schools and trying to locate the information that I was searching for. So we hope to share some key tips and resources with you today. And since we are recording today's session, please put any questions you have in the chat or save them until the end, and then we will answer them at that time when we stop the recording. So here's our bootcamp team. I'll introduce myself first and then let each of my colleagues introduce themselves as well. My name is Dawn Mirth Johnson, and I'm a speech language pathologist. As an education consultant on the special education team at DPI, I support speech language and also assistive technology with a focus on AAC. My experience prior to DPI has primarily been in the school setting, but I started my career in the skilled nursing facility setting and have also worked at the university level. And coming to the schools from skilled nursing, I really wish I would have had something like this bootcamp series to really set me up for my practice in the schools. And then I'm going to turn it over to Michelle.
Hello, everybody. I am Michelle Silverman. I am an occupational therapist. And some of you, if you were around at all last year, may remember me from working with Carlin as an OTD capstone student. And actually, one of the things I did was look at how new grads and people coming here from different fields, coming to school-based practice, would obtain the information that they needed to really provide best practice in school. So this is a wonderful opportunity for that. And I've officially joined the DPI team here as the OT, PT, and assistive technology consultant. My background includes lots of years in school-based practice and also teaching in occupational therapy and assistive technology at UW Milwaukee. And I'm really excited to bring this experience here and learn from all of you as well. Carlin.
Hi, everybody. I'm Carlin Higby, and I have been a part of the bootcamp team for, I think this might be my 4th year that we've been doing bootcamp. I am so excited to be able to work with Dawn and Michelle again as we do the bootcamp series this year and look forward to getting to know you all better. I have been a school-based therapist for a really long time, and I'm afraid to even tell you how many years, but it's been a great profession. And for those of you who are just starting or those of you who have been around, we certainly have our ups and downs, and things in the schools now are stressful at times, and we certainly understand that. So we also hope that throughout this boot camp time, you'll feel some support from us and some love from us about the challenges and trying to just figure out, regardless of whatever environment or work setting you come from, that we understand there's a lot to learn and a lot to navigate, and we're here to help you with that. So we look forward to doing that this year. So as we look at the resources today, please keep in mind, if this starts to feel like it's raising your anxiety, like there's so many letters and so many words and so many acronyms, when you do the pre-learning modules for the boot camp, you will be very familiar with all of those terms, and we'll give you that pre-learning information will give you a good foundation for the rest of our boot camp series. So bear with us. We, as Dawn said, wanted to make sure that you had a sense of knowing a little bit about where to find things on the DPI website. We're working hard at DPI to keep it organized and to find ways that makes it easier for our customers, you guys, parents, administrators, to access the information you need. So each slide contains a hyperlink to something you might need. We're going to be taking turns presenting different slides, and we'll try to kind of make a note to ones that we think are particularly relevant or particularly important for you to know, or the ones around which we get the most questions. So this is our first one, just giving you a brief overview of the website. And the next one is, I think, a really helpful one. And you might, if you're new, if you're brand new this year, but if you've been at least 1 year in the schools, you'll understand we really do feel sometimes like we have this small role within the whole evaluation and IEP process. But actually, we have a pretty big role in how we communicate with our team and how we exchange information. And this is a really good foundational page to help you understand just almost anything within special education topics. So if you wanted to obtain information, for example, about educational autism, you can click on this in the alphabetical listing and get information about just a ton of resources. And as you get time throughout the year, I hope you'll explore this because you'll find a lot of information that you'll have questions about. On this next page, oh, this is really helpful too. Gives you a really good list of a lot of the acronyms that we're going to talk about today. So if you hear the acronym BIP, you can scroll down and find out that that means a behavior intervention plan. Some of these have more connection with administrative things as I look at this list too, but a lot of them affect us as well. And you'll hear people talk about, well, I'm working for a CISA. I see the CISA on there and it explains what that is. And then a lot of the acronyms related to the categories of students that we serve as well. So this is an excellent resource. I just want to say, because I know this we are going to be presenting a lot of stuff today, so please do put your questions in the chat. I just want to, so we've had a couple people join us. We're recording today's session, and if you have questions about any of these things, put them in the chat because I have a feeling we'll have some time at the end. Bookmark this page. This is one that you'll want to save and have access to when DPI updates something or sends out some additional guidance around things. They do it as a bulletin. And this is the bulletin index where you'll not only find the topic of the bulletin, but you'll find the listing for it and the bulletin number. That's how a lot of the people refer to the bulletins. You can find all kinds of great information on these bulletins, and they're bulletins that relate to related services provision, special education evaluation, assistive technology. We've just got a lot of good materials here. So please bookmark this one. I think you'll find the resources on this page very helpful. This one is also, we didn't put an arrow, but when I'm trying to figure out exactly how I want to say this. You're going to find a lot of information related to comprehensive special education evaluation process. And one of the things we'll be talking about throughout boot camp is one of the primary differences between community-based therapy services and school-based therapy services is that in the school, we really function very much as a part of the team. Related services, you don't qualify for related services, and some of the steps that help you walk through that process, you can find language and information in here in terms of our role as a part of that comprehensive special education evaluation process. There's some excellent videos here. Again, you'll see an information bulletin that's referenced here. So there's 2 places you could find that. I would definitely recommend putting a link to this comprehensive special education evaluation bulletin. It has a lot of good questions and answers on it. It's got good content, and then there's a Q&A section at the bottom. The other thing is we're going to talk a little bit more about those multi-level systems of support. So we'll talk about that in just a couple of minutes, but just know that those are some really good resources there. Again, these are some of the primary bulletins that we thought would be helpful. And I think when we think about the questions we get during the year, we often send these bulletins or this information out in response to those questions. So particularly that role of medical and clinical information, I think that's a really important one to take a look at and maybe even download more than bookmark. You will find, if you haven't had this experience yet, you will in your career without a doubt. And that's when you get the letter from a physician or a neuropsychologist that says, Johnny needs sensory integration therapy 2 times a week at school or something like that. And that often causes districts and therapists to panic. And this document about the role of medical and clinical information in special education evaluation and IEP development is very helpful in dealing with that. So we will be going into that in particular. We'll do a deep dive on that later in the year, but just know that's a good one that you might want to have ready access to. All of these are good ones. So then we also I mentioned briefly about equitable multi-level systems of supports. So when we think about that, we are encouraged to think of special education as a part of the continuum of regular education. And this is where that continuum begins. There's a link in here about the role of speech and language pathologists in Wisconsin in terms of equitable multi-level systems of support. Even if you're an OT or a PT, there's a lot of information in that link that relates to us. We do have a role that we can play, particularly some of the terms you'll hear are Tier 1 and Tier 2. Think about universal design, making systems that helping build capacity within our schools so that we can meet the needs of students that are sometimes delayed or maybe have a difference in their developmental progress, but don't necessarily have an impairment. And we're seeing this a lot in the area of social emotional learning. But this is another area that we'll be doing a very deep dive in, talking about the role that OTs, PTs, and SLPs can play, particularly at that Tier 1, Tier 2 level within those multi-level systems of support. Oops, my thing didn't advance here. This is, I think, really interesting. And I was so glad when DPI published this information about the 6 areas of academic and functional skill. The intention that DPI had in developing this guideline is, or framework, I guess, resource, is to help us as IEP team members really look at that whole child and not such a siloed approach of this is my OT piece, this is my PT piece, this is speech, but looking at the whole child. And to facilitate that, DPI developed these 6 areas in hopes that we could gather information, report information in our own evaluation reports, and then maybe even as a team summarize our team evaluation report and the present level of performance in the IEP under these headings of functional performance. This is an area we will talk about extensively during boot camp, but this is where you'll find some of that information to start familiarizing yourself with these 6 areas of academic and functional performance. So DPI requires that IEP teams identify at least one, what they call a reporting special education disability category. So you'll see listed here. Maybe Dawn, if you want to go to the page. Yeah, this is, I'm so glad you have these links ready to go. In Wisconsin, we have 12 special education disability categories. One of the things, and for those of you who have been in boot camp before, as you merge yourself into this educational world, we have terms as therapists that we use, and DPI has the same term, or not DPI, education law has the same. So disability is a really good example of that. When we think of disability, we think of what we think of naturally as an OTPT or SLP. But when we talk about educational disability categories, that would be these areas where students legally are determined to meet the criteria or the categories for these areas of disability in education. I think this is a really important link if you're new to schools to kind of familiarize yourself. I know, kind of like Dawn was saying, when I first started practicing in the schools, and these disability categories have changed a little bit in each state, you'll find them to be slightly different. But that was kind of hard for me to kind of make that shift. So this is a really helpful resource. One thing that I wanted to say about that real quickly is that in Wisconsin, we have to report at least one special education disability category. However, if an IEP team feels that it's warranted, they can identify a second, or what the guidelines refer to as another, other, quote unquote, disability category. With the exception, so if you're brand new, this is going to be sound a little confusing. One of the disability categories is significant developmental delay. Significant developmental delay, that's often referred to as SDD. And that is going to be most children from the ages of 3 through 9 years old, I believe it is that it goes through, right, Don? 3 to 9? Yeah. And so under that category, per state statute, so that's an important thing to remember, per state statute, no secondary disability or other disability category is allowed, because significant developmental delay is so comprehensive that it almost by definition includes some kind of language disorder or some kind of information processing disorder. So while a child may have language and processing delays, if they meet the criteria for significant developmental delay, there is no need, and it's not allowed by statute to have a second category. So that's an important thing to keep in mind. Then this is also, I think, really important, and we will spend a lot of time in this during the year referring back to this 5-step process. So in Wisconsin, we we have this guidance to help us in writing IEPs that's called College and Career Ready IEPs, Improving Outcomes for Students ages 3 through 21. And this guidance doesn't reflect new requirements, but rather it's a renewed focus on the purpose of IEPs. And again, it was designed to help us step away from those siloed, disjointed kind of ways of reporting about students' skills and abilities, and looking at them more as a whole child, and really helping us to think about what's the educational impact of the barriers that we're seeing to their accessing and engaging and progressing in their educational program. So again, remember, you're going to hear those words a lot. Accessing, engaging, and progressing. And that's where we focus. So we start with that understanding achievement, or what is their present level of performance? What are their strengths? We identify the effects or the barriers that are preventing that access and engagement. And then as a team, we develop goals. Now, you're going to hear a lot about the importance of collaborative goal development. That does not mean that every person on the IEP team has to be able to support the same goal, but it means that as a team, you decide and prioritize what are the goals for the student. And then as you get to step 4, which is called aligning services, that's the point at which the IEP team should be making decisions about whether or not a student is going to need the services, the related services of OT, PT, and sometimes speech to help a child address their needs and to address their goals. So it's not a decision that's made until after the goals are developed and the team has an opportunity to talk about it. And this whole process is very helpful in thinking that through. And now I hand it over to my friend Dawn.
Okay, thank you, Carlin. So this next document is something I wish I knew about earlier in my career, but special education in plain language. It is a very helpful resource for parents, school professionals, and others to understand some of the procedures involved in special education. This is in an electronic book form. It's not a complete explanation of all of the special education laws, but it has information about many of the most common things that the readers want to know. This book is not meant to give legal advice, but like I said, it really helps understand things in plain language and may be useful not only for you as a practitioner, but to share with parents for the students that you work with. This webpage has a link to each of the special education forms. In addition, there is a guide to special education forms linked on this page. So let's go to the main one. So you'll see sample education, special education forms, And each of the forms that are used throughout the process are linked here so that you can see them. Sometimes they may look a little different in your systems depending on what computer system you use, but they should all align with what with DPI's model of the forms. And then if you get to the Guide to Special Education forms, this is where you can really look at what should be included on the forms when you are completing them to support documentation compliance with federal and state special education requirements related to the IEP team process. You should note that it includes a helpful discussion of these specific requirements related to each of these forms, and there's directions for use of each form and tips for implementing them during the process. So you can click right on the area, it'll get there, and there's a clarification or an explanation for each of the parts of the IEP. Okay, now we're going to get into some speech and language specific parts of the DPI website, and then we're going to go to some occupational therapy and physical therapy specific parts of the DPI website. So if you are a speech language pathologist, I would highly recommend that you bookmark this page on the DPI website. And this page consists of tabs at the top and 3 rectangles that go into different areas that we'll discuss, and then some additional resources at the bottom related to what we showed you previously. So the tabs at the top are each a drop-down menu. So that's important to know. If you click on it, you can get more information. And so you can find the definition of speech or language impairment that is in the Wisconsin Administrative Code. You can go directly to the code to see what it looks like there. There's information on incidence and disproportionality of SLI or speech or language impairment. And then there's information about the criteria. So let's go on to the next page where we look at that criteria. Under the SLI criteria tab, you will see that there are a lot of good resources for you. And these are resources that when people ask me questions, I often refer people to the documents in on this website. So this is a good place to look if you have questions and are looking for the answers to those questions. So the first one is the IEP forms guidance for the speech or language impairment criteria. So this talks you through the criteria. The rule changed for SLI in 2021. So there is a summary of those changes that occurred back then and some of the revisions and comparison of the previous rule and the current rule. You can also find a link to the speech or language criteria form in English, and then we have Hmong and Spanish versions as well. Okay, then, so if I go back to the page here, you can see that that was still under the tabs. Now we're going to look at the 3 vertical rectangles. And the first one is the state and national professional supports for speech language pathologists. So on this page, you're going to see if you are looking for, and I just got this question yesterday, information about educator effectiveness for SLPs and how that works. There is a tab that talks all about the system that was developed in Wisconsin specifically for speech language pathologists related to the evaluation system. And then you'll see the purpose and you'll have a link to all of the forms. So if your district is not utilizing this, I would highly recommend that you advocate for it because it really aligns more with our roles and responsibilities in the schools, which are different than those of teachers. There is a tab for licensing here. And in the licensing tab, you will find the lead bulletin. The lead is the licensing team, but there is a bulletin that is directly related to licensing for speech language pathologists. You will find national speech and language resources, a lot of links to things from ASHA and some of the other states. You will find Wisconsin specific resources, links to WISHA, CISA 5, SLP Institute, the Assistive Technology website, and then this is where you can sign yourself up for the speech and language email list. We'll show you a couple different ways to do this later, But at the bottom of this page, you'll see where you can sign up specifically for the email list and the Post-it note updates. So this is an important rectangle for you to pay attention to on the SLI page. The second rectangle is the assessment tools for speech or language impairment. On this page, you will see it just contains a wealth of information related to assessment. You're going to see all of these tabs that have drop downs, and they're related to assessments in each of the areas. So if I go back, oh, and then on this page, on the slide, you'll actually have a link to the YouTube SLI assessment playlist. So when the criteria changed in 2021, Andrea Bertoni, who was in my position at that time, hosted webinars on each of the areas that are part of the SLI criteria. So this is a really helpful playlist if you haven't seen it before or even want to go back and review it. So under each of the tabs, you will see different things that can answer your questions. This is one that I refer to often, speech or language impairment criteria question and answer document. So if you have specific questions related to the criteria, I would definitely take a look at this document. There are resources for families and school staff. There is a great resource here on documenting impact on educational performance and a link to articulation and speech sound development chart. Under speech disorders, you will see lots of information about different ways that you can assess speech sound disorders. And I want to say under each area, it's important to note that there is a rubric that you can look at that can help you in making decisions under the SLI category. So you'll see eligibility considerations for speech rubric. Dynamic assessment has its own tab on here, and you'll see there's a checklist for completing dynamic assessments. There is a tab on limitations of norm reference tests. And this will speak to why the criteria changed back in 2021. You'll see a tab for culturally responsive assessment practices. There's a lot of good information there related to assessing English learners when conducting that comprehensive special education assessment. Then we get to the areas of fluency, language, and voice. And again, under each one, you'll see that there's a rubric. So I think those can be really, really helpful for you, especially if you are new to the criteria or new to work in schools. Okay. Then this is kind of a messy page, but there's a few things I wanted you to see on this page. I'm going to go back. This is our third rectangle, speech and language hot topics, IEP development, service delivery, and equity resources. So on this page, you will be able to find, this will be your go-to page really for newly released resources. A few of the resources are highlighted on the slide. So you'll see I highlighted addressing feeding and swallowing in schools. That is a new free webinar series that we are offering this year, and it's open to a number of professionals. So you'll want to definitely check that out and register if you haven't already. There is, again, a link to that YouTube playlist on this page. This is the flyer to register for boot camp, which hopefully all of you have seen since you are here today. Here's that document again that Carlin was referring to, the role of medical and clinical information. And then in 2023, we held a webinar on considering related services. So if you're looking for that link, it's here on this page. There is a link to that document that Carlin referred to earlier, which is the role of SLPs in the equitable multi-level systems of support. There are resources. This is another one I refer people to frequently. It's disability-related need affecting reading for students eligible for an IEP with a speech or language impairment. You will find tabs below all of those resources, and some of the ones that you might want to check out are, well, they're all good, but there's some guidance on using paraprofessionals. There's some guidance on Medicaid billing, speech and language as a related service. And down below, you're going to see some other tabs, and there's one about consideration when using personal pronouns. A few of these areas need some updating and will be updated within the next couple of years, but I wanted you to at least be aware that they are there and where to find the information that is available currently. So those are highlighted on that slide. And I will turn it over to Michelle.
Hello, everybody. First of all, many of you may have seen this lovely green book before. Oops, there we go. Okay, it's a little fuzzed out. I have one here at my desk, but it is also available to you online. If you click on the link, it is right there. This is the OTPT resource guide. It is in electronic format, and yes, it is still in process of being updated. We plan to make this a large part of the OT and PT website, similar to what you just saw on the speech website, with separate links to specific topic areas. And eventually we hope to add topic areas focused on specific information also for administrators and educators. So that is still coming. And I believe we will be slowly rolling it out as we are updating the sections. And I just wanted to make a side comment that also Carlin put in the chat. Due to the nature of speech and language impairment and the fact that it is a specific disability category, and it can also be a related service. First of all, don't worry if that sounds complicated. We'll shed some light on that throughout the bootcamp series, but also it is a little more of a robust area of practice. So there's a lot going on that website, and our OTPT websites are a little, have a little less on them right now, but we'll be beefing up soon, I guess I should say. So the first one I will bring you to is the OT website, the school-based OT website. The link to register, of course, for bootcamp is down at the bottom there, as well as some other links to help you with evidence-based practice. The resource guide link is on here as well, right there, that we were just showing you, and information about licensure should you need that also. And then at the very bottom is there's that link to contact special education. If you don't find your answers here or in the resource guide, you can click on that link and you will probably end up emailing one of us wonderful people and getting some more information, or emailing us directly. And here's the physical therapy webpage. It has similar information as the OT webpage with important information that you can access here as well, including the evidence-based practice, the resource guide, and some other best practice and training information for you to access. And then the third webpage I would direct you to is one that is similar to what Dawn was talking about with evaluation for speech and language therapists. This is an optional professional evaluation system for OT and PT professions that is sort of a parallel format to the Wisconsin Educator Effectiveness System used for teacher evaluations. It's intended as a learning-centered, continuous improvement system providing relevant feedback for you, the therapist. It also supports guided, individualized, and self-determined professional growth. And Wisconsin created evaluation tools are available at the link on this slide. So this may be helpful also for administrators and supervisors to understand the differences between our role and the role of teachers. Many things in here do need to be updated as well. So you might find some very useful tools and templates that will serve as a starting point. And you can feel free to modify these as needed for your setting. So the next thing here, this is really important. You'll be hearing conversations about workload versus caseload considerations if you haven't already. And we'll be talking a lot more about this later in the series, but caseload refers to the number of students that you have with IEPs and 504 plans that are served by school-based professionals throughout the district and indirect service delivery options. So the caseload model is more like what you might find in a medical model of a pull-out kind of model that does not necessarily align with educationally relevant needs of the student. So the concept of workload is important because every caseload with 45 students, as we all know, is not the same because the needs of the student can vary so significantly. You can have students that have very high needs and high amounts of service time, and maybe you have 5 students that you only see minimally, or maybe you have 1 student you see minimally. So it's highly variable. So as we move toward best practice model of integrated services, this is one of the reasons that caseload number guidelines are not always helpful. So as an alternative, something that we are working towards is a workload model, which refers to all of those activities required and performed by school-based professionals, like time spent face-to-face direct services, as well as time spent on other activities like writing IEPs and attending IEP meetings and implementing best practice, ensuring compliance with IDEA, lots of other mandates that we have to make sure that we are in compliance with. So a workload approach, in a workload approach, the LEA assigns a certain number of students for services after allocating the time needed to complete all of the responsibilities for each individual student. So this again is a topic we will dive into later. And in the meantime, here's the link to information about workload considerations. And you'll also find a document for considerations for determining special education workloads, Wisconsin DPI special education team. So that's all there for you as well. So Dawn mentioned the email list. We're going to mention it again a little later. Here's how to get signed up for the email list. There's one for speech and language and one for OT and PTs combined. And there's also one for assistive technology that I would encourage you to sign up for as well. Whether or not that's a specific area of interest for you, you'll get information and start to understand assistive technology a little more too. So here are the directions. I don't need to read through them for you, but if you have any trouble with it, you can just let us know.
Okay, we wanted to briefly touch on a few other things that you might find useful on the DPI website. One of those is a newer page called Wisconsin Reads, and it's all about Act 20. Act 20 will likely be a hot topic of discussion as you begin the school year. It is often referred to as the literacy or the reading bill. It outlines requirements for science-based early reading instruction in Wisconsin. According to the Act, teachers of 5K through grade 3 and reading teachers must complete a training on effective reading instruction. Currently, SLPs, OTs, PTs are not part of that requirement, but you could certainly advocate to be involved in the training if this is something of interest to you, and especially for SLPs, it overlaps a lot with what we do with students with language. So Act 20 provides a definition of science-based early literacy instruction. It requires a single statewide reading readiness screener. So this screener will be administered to 4K students 2 times per year and to 5K students 3 times per year. Because of some delays, the very first screening for this year is being waived for this school year, but it is optional if your districts decide they want to start right away and see how it goes in their districts. So there is also a required diagnostic reading assessment for students scoring below the 25th percentile on the screener and a personal reading plan for those students. You can find out more about Act 20 through the links on this slide, which also includes a newly added link for how Act 20 interacts with students with IEPs. There are some frequently asked questions that are answered in that document. This is something I just wanted to bring your attention to. We have some resources on the evaluation practices for SLPs, and they're currently being developed through a discretionary grant in collaboration with the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, and will be available for you in the future. Right now, there actually is a website that you can go to, and John Heilman and Alyssa Wattina, who run the grant along with myself at DPI, are really working on getting some resources together from the work of the grant that they're doing. So we're just beginning the third of a 5-year grant. We have 6 school districts currently participating, and in the spring of this year, we will be opening it up to an additional 6 districts to join us for next year, or the next 2 years after this. Let's see, we don't need that to play. There we go. I also wanted to point out the supporting neurodiverse students resources that are on the DPI website. You can go to their direct page and find all kinds of trainings available, some deep dive modules, some quick bites if you just want to get fast information when you have time, some virtual trainings, and a toolkit. So this will be really important for all of you for working with neurodiverse learners. And then we also wanted to make sure that you were aware of the resources on the Assistive Technology Forward page, AT Forward. So there's a link to the main page here. On that page, you will find a way to become a member. So you can sign up and just become a member of the community of practice. You will see a meeting schedule. So on that meeting schedule, you can sign up for any of the free webinars offered throughout the year. And you'll see that the first one is Tuesday, September 17th. They are offered at different times during the year, and they are recorded and later available on the AT Forward webpage. So you can click a link to register for any of those meetings. And also you will see on there a chance to earn micro-credentials. So if you're interested in studying an area in more depth, you could earn a micro-credential in that area. So it could be AAC communication, it could be things like accessible education materials. There's a variety of students with complex needs, early childhood, independent living, organizational and executive functioning, seating and positioning, just lots of areas that might be of interest to you as you navigate assistive technology in your district. There is a link on this slide also to the Video Resource Library, the Wisconsin AEM Center, and the lending library called AT for All, which is part of Wisconsin AT for All, or the Wisconsin Assistive Technology Program. So you can go here if you are looking to get any kind of devices or other types of light, mid, or high-tech assistive technology to use with your student. That covers that area. We have one more slide, 2 more slides. Okay, so we're getting there. Early learning technical assistance and implementation services and supports. We wanted you to be aware of these. You can actually join their email list as well. There's a link to join that on here and find out what kind of trainings this grant provides. And our final resource relates to family involvement. We need to think about how we can empower parents and help them navigate this complex world of IEPs and special education services. There are 2 points in particular we want to emphasize: parent consultation and collaboration that can be noted in the IEP as part of the on behalf of services. And given that Part B, Indicator 8, emphasizes parent involvement in this indirect service, when we put that in the program modifications and supports, we are finding ways to collaborate with parents. We have some resources here. Each one is live linked. So if you want to find out more about each of these statewide family support organizations that are helpful, I think both for us as practitioners and for parents, these are some things that we encourage you to share with families. And finally, here's how you can contact us at DPI. We always love hearing from you. More often than not, we go to a lot of the same links and documents that we shared throughout today's session to help answer your questions. So now that you know where to find important information on the DPI website, you might be able to locate answers to your burning questions on your own and more quickly. But feel free to reach out if you need additional information or clarification from any of us. So we included our email links here. And at this time, we'll stop the recording and then we'll open up to any questions that you all might have from today's presentation.